Hello and welcome to this episode of Natter with Neve, where I have the delightful Andrea Rainsford, who's going to talk about her story and what she has overcome. Andrea is a businesswoman. She leads other women in business. Her ethos is freedom. So consistent income with freedom. But we're not here to talk about business today because Andrea has a most fascinating story. Um, and when I was first introduced to Andrea, I was just blown away by her story, which is why I love that she has decided to come here and talk to us today.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure. Andrea, one of the things you said in the application form for this podcast was that you were influenced or inspired by a lady called Vera Atkins, whom I've not actually heard of. So that's the first thing I want to explore with you. Who is she and what has she done and what has she done that's inspired you so much?
Vera basically was responsible for sending lots of female spies behind in enemy lines to the French resistance. So she basically sent lots of women into harm's way. Now, it wasn't sanctioned by the War Office, and to the outside world, they didn't know that these women had gone into harm's way. Even their families didn't know that they were spies and they'd gone behind enemy lines. But they were trained at at a bit of a rush at last minute because we were desperate and we were desperate to win the war, and they felt that it was the only way that we could get bodies on the ground in the resistance was by training women. And Vera she worked in the War Office. She didn't really have a very high up position, but she was responsible for choosing these women and sending them behind enemy lines. And there was quite a large proportion that never came back. So when the war ended, she was waiting because obviously they were spies and they'd got different identities. And if they were in concentration camps and they hadn't been recognized or identified as spies, they may well have been coming back when all the concentration camps closed. So she waited for a little while after the war ended and the camps were closed, and a large number of them didn't come back. And so she made it her mission for the next 3 to 5 years to locate all of them, and to find out what had happened to them. And she didn't leave any stone unturned. And then she was able to go back and write letters to all of their families and say the amazing work that they'd done and how they'd helped the war effort. And she kept all of her own files. So she kept all of the letters, she kept all of their names, their pictures, their training records, she kept everything. And she retired to Cornwall. And when she passed, her family found all of the files and made them public. So we wouldn't have known anything about any of them and the work that they did and everything that they undertook if it hadn't been for Vera Atkins, because the War Office were trying to keep it a secret. They didn't want their families to know that they died in the war, and I think it was part of the Geneva Convention. Women couldn't take those roles, so these women knew that if they were caught and they were found as being a spy, that they would be executed because it wasn't part of the Geneva Convention. So a lot of them were murdered for being spies, but she was able to interview Gestapo generals, SS generals. She was that they were held for war crimes, and she went in and she had access to them in their cells, and she interviewed them and she showed them pictures, and she did everything she possibly could to identify these women. And I think the reason that she's inspired me is because it was kindness. It was kindness that was at her core, and that's my core value, and it's what I lead my business with. She made sure that she knew what had happened to every single one of them, and she was relentless, and she never gave up.
Wow, and that compassion as well, that idea that actually she needed to let the families know what these women, not just what they went through, but what they did for their country and for, you know, to try and save everybody as well. That's just amazing. And the fact that, as you said, she left no stone unturned. Um,
Yeah, she was
it-
relentless in her
yeah.
pursuit. She took the weight of what she'd done incredibly seriously. She'd chosen these women. She felt as though she'd put them into harm's way and she was responsible for them. And yes, it was necessary. And yes, they all knew what they were undertaking. But she still cared for them and their memory,
Yeah.
and she needed to know where they were buried. She needed to know where their bodies were. She needed to know what had happened to them. And yeah, and I think that was testament to her, because the War Office basically just closed the book and left them.
Yes, I mean, I can imagine, I mean, the war office, there are so many unmarked graves as well, aren't there? And it won't just be the women, it will be,
The
male
men, yeah,
soldiers as well.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so that just shows something, I don't know, extraordinary in her. She knew she
In
was
her
brave.
pursuit.
Yeah. But also those women as well, the bravery they must have had and the courage to actually go and do something that they knew they could be killed for doing
I
that.
think I think over half of them didn't come back. So a large number of them did. There was a very clever girl that basically changed her name and told the soldiers that captured her that her surname was Churchill. So she pretended to be Winston's granddaughter,
Okay,
and
wow.
they basically kept her alive because they thought she was a bargaining chip. So she was incredibly clever, and she was actually traded for German prisoner of war. And then obviously when she got to the other side, to do the swap, they wouldn't do the swap because they said, "Thank you, we've got her, but she isn't Winston Churchill's granddaughter, so we're not giving you your shoulders back." But it was incredibly clever and astute, that she thought that
Yeah.
up to be able to. She knew it would get her home.
Yeah. But also what I mean I love about these stories is that, we actually see the intrinsic part that women actually had in the war.
Mm.
Because a lot of that in our
Well, we
history
wouldn't have
books,
known, would we? We wouldn't have
no,
known, would we, if she hadn't
no,
have kept those
no.
files? We wouldn't
Yeah.
have known about all these extraordinary women.
Mm. And I think it's only now, in the last kind of, I don't know, I mean, certainly not at the beginning of my lifetime, but in the last few years that we've actually started to hear more about not just women in the war, but women throughout
Mm.
life and the things they've achieved. I was watching something on TikTok the other day. I can't remember the names now, but they listed a whole load of women mathematicians who were
Mm.
responsible for lots of mathematical inventions, or what you call them in maths, I don't know, but
Yeah, yeah, I know what
they
you
were
mean.
never
Yeah,
given credit. The men they were working for or working with were given the credit. In fact, and some male scientists have won Nobel prizes for things that women actually came up with. Um,
yeah, and they weren't given the credit for it.
no, and I love that now we're starting to see that we're starting to give um, women the credit for things, and I love that story about Vera because of we're giving women the credit. But I also love one of the things that I love about you and the way you run your business is that you're actually empowering women to not just run a business, but to actually stand up for themselves in that business and to have the freedom that we see men in life having, and that actually it just comes natural to men to do those sort of things, doesn't it? Whereas women, we
I
sort
think,
of
yeah, I think there's some statistics, isn't there, that basically, I think men that are doing the same role as us, no matter what role we're in, but men that are doing exactly the same role as us, I think the difference in income is around 32%. And there's going to be many reasons for that, and I think we're not going to speculate on what those reasons are, but the majority of it is that what we believe in ourselves, and what we believe we're worth, and what we believe we can be paid. And I think that there is a gap, but I think we many of us just we don't ask for what we're worth, do we?
no, we don't. And I think as women, a lot of us were brought up, and I know I certainly was, we were brought up to put everybody else first. And kind of
Yeah,
you were the bottom of the pile. And, I mean, I know my parents sent, went to university, I studied accountancy, and the idea was I got a job in accountancy. But then once I got married, it was kind of like, oh, well, now you're married. You're supposed to give up work and have babies. Nah. you know, and that's kind of the path I was led down as well, that, women didn't. Yeah, you work, the whole purpose of working from my parents' point of view and that generation was, we went to university, we went to work with the idea of meeting a man.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
and that's the way it was. I think,
Yeah.
going back to our formative years, that was the way my grandparents were. It was the way that my mum was. It was the way that my aunties were. I mean, I can remember as children, my dad was one of nine, and we used to go to my nan's on a Sunday afternoon, and the men would be in the dining room playing cards and gambling and drinking, and the women would be making the lunch.
Well, yep, exactly.
The male children could play in the hall, they could play football and they could play games, and the female children had to sit in the living room and be quiet and behave themselves. And I couldn't be quiet and behave myself to save my life. So it was basically it was like a physical impossibility for me. And my mum used to say to me before we went in there, can you just behave yourself for 5 minutes? But it was because I was a bundle of energy, and I was inquisitive, and my mum used to call me why, because I used to ask why at everything. If she told me to do something, she told me to eat something. If why is that like that? Why is that like? She said, I'm going to call you why, because it's all you ever ask is why. And I think that right from an early age, I was never going to conform. I was never going to do as I was told. And I think there's many of us now, aren't there, that we won't be put in a box. We won't be
Yeah,
told what we're going to do. We won't fit to the stereotype that we learnt as a child. And I think we're paving the way for women to empower themselves and realise that they were here for a much bigger purpose and a much brighter purpose.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I love that story about it because I was a questioner as well. And my mother's standard answer was because God loves Ireland. Um,
My mum didn't have one. Yeah, she did used to say in the end because I said so, and I was never happy with because I said so. Then I'd
yeah.
start on my dad. I'd be like, Dad, why? Because Mum hasn't got an answer. And she used to say, ask your dad when your dad comes home. That used to be a standard question. But I think, I said to my dad in later life, it's all your fault because I've got your brain.
Mm.
I said so you didn't have any right to tell me off because I was like one of you, and that just goes without saying. I was going to be like one of you, and I'm like you. And he always had an inquisitive brain. So yeah, I'm glad I
Yeah.
took after him.
And I've always been what, I would call a quiet rebel. I used to drive my mother insane because, she would tell me not to do something and I would find a way to do it. My sister, I have a
Yeah.
sister who's very stubborn and she would just outright do it and then get told off and in those days we got slapped as well. So she would suffer the consequences where I would do it, but I would find a way to do it
Mm.
that it wouldn't be noticed at first, and it was only kind of
Yeah.
after the event, and then my mum would go, "Oh my God." I mean, what can you say? You know, I was inventive, so she couldn't really.
They have to admire your tenacity, don't they, really?
Yeah, yeah,
Because yeah, they just wish they'd thought of it or wish they'd been like that. And so they admire you to a certain degree. I think my mum yeah, she resented me in later life. We didn't have the best relationship. And I think she resented the fact that I had such bounce back ability. Um, she just used to said to me, "You're like rubber. You just don't let anything phase you," and that isn't strictly true.
Mm,
It's just a perception to the outside world, isn't it? I think the online world in which we spend a large proportion of our life, perception is
mm,
everything, isn't it? It's and we people get a certain perception of us, and I'm on a mission to change it, really. I think we've got to stop with the constant positivity that we're all succeeding and we're all earning millions of pounds and we've all done it really easily and we've done it in 5 minutes and we're all selling
mm,
that stereotype. For me, it's got to stop. And the reason that I'm passionate that why it's got to stop is because life is good, bad, and it's ugly. It's all of those things in equal measure, and we can't just show one perception. We've got to show the good, the bad, and the ugly. As difficult it is, as painful as it is, because if we're going to share the good, we've got to share everything else that goes with it, and that's what I truly believe is because what's happening is there's a large proportion of women out there that are looking at this success, constant success, and they're thinking that there's something seriously wrong with them because they're like, well, my life isn't like that, and I'm not living like that, and my life doesn't look like that, and I'm not earning that amount of money, and I haven't got, I'm not living the lifestyle that she's living. So there must be something seriously wrong with me, and I can't get it right. And I think that's what's got to stop. Is the more
Yeah.
honest we are, people are not going to sit there thinking there is something really wrong with me.
Yeah, I mean, social media, we put out the best on there, don't we? I mean, I don't always. I do share some of the hard stuff, the difficult stuff. And, I'll be perfectly honest, my business is nowhere near where I want it to be. And it's hard.
Most of us it isn't, and
Yeah.
but if we all shared that our businesses aren't where they want us to be,
Yeah.
we're not all going to feel inadequate, are we?
No, exactly. And I look at others and I think, okay. And because I'm in communities with others and I look at others people's, social media and it looks like they're doing stonkingly well. And I think, but I heard you on a call last week complaining that you've got no clients.
Mm.
And yet so there's a real,
There's a disconnect, isn't there?
there's a huge disconnect in that. Now I know as businesswomen we have to talk about a certain amount of success, don't we? Because otherwise, nobody's going to, unless you've had some successes, nobody's going to want to
Mm.
interact with you or, be a part of your business, come to you for coaching or whatever it is you do. You have to have, you have to say that you're successful in some way, but I think we also have to show, as you said, the
Yeah,
other
I
side of
think
it.
we need to demonstrate our brilliance. And there's many ways that we can do that. It isn't always monetary. It isn't, a lot of us don't just help people make money. We help people in so many different ways. We change lives in so many different ways. I run a women's community called Women Winning in Business, and we have local events all around the UK. I think we're in 15 different cities. And I went to Big Festoon a couple of weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I was going to this big event. It's a huge event. It was big for me because there's going to be over 800 people there. It was totally out of my comfort zone. And I walked into the event thinking, I'm gonna cancel Women Winning in Business. I'm going to close it down, and I'm going to close down Affinity because it's just too much stress. There's 15 cities. I've got 30 hosts. I've got all of these things that I'm trying to manage. It's just too much, and I just don't want the stress anymore. I want a quiet life. And I walked into the event, and that was where I was thinking. And I said to the universe, you need to send me a sign. If this is what I'm meant to do, and this is the path that I'm meant to take, you need to send me a sign. And the first lady that I came across, it was like a walkway. So at the
Yeah.
big thing, you've got the expo where people present. And this lady stopped me and she said, you don't know me. She said, but I just need to tell you that you changed my life. So I looked at the sky and said, you're having a laugh, aren't you? Is what I said. Um, and she went on to tell me that she'd been on LinkedIn for about 4 or 5 years, and she'd had nothing but toxic experiences. And that day she decided that she was going to close down her business and she was going to close down her account. And she said, and along you came. She said, and you were just incredibly kind to me. She said, you gave me lots of advice, and nobody else commented on my post apart from you. She said, and that day I decided to stay because of what you said and because of what you did. She said, and I then stayed for a further 5 years and I've made £3 million.
Wow. And that's the thing is we often don't even recognize the influence we have on other people, do we? That one Facebook
People,
post
we
you put
don't, we
out.
don't, we don't tell people, do we? We don't
No.
make a habit of telling them. And the universe, I said to the universe, send me a sign. She stopped me, and that was it then.
Mm.
So when I got home, I thought, well, why am I finding this so tough? Why am I finding it so hard at the moment? And why do I want to jack it in? And the truth is that growth is uncomfortable.
Mm.
Growth isn't a place where you're going to sit there and you're going to think, this is really comfy. I'm really happy. I really want to stay here. You're going to think,
Yeah.
I've had enough of this. I want to quit. I want to jack it in. And that's why I say to women on a weekly basis, if you don't want to jack your business in once a month, you're not doing it right. And they look and they look at me and they say, why? And I said, because you're growing. It's uncomfortable. You don't like it. You're out of your depth. You're not too sure what you're doing. You don't know what your next step is, and you're figuring it out as you go. You'll have a plan and you've got a focus and you've got a vision, but it's all alien because it's new and you've never been there before. And I think we need to understand that. And the more women that show up and say growth is uncomfortable, you're not going to like it, but you want to get to where you're going, there are going to be phases of your business that you're not going to like.
Yeah, but that applies to life as well as just business,
Does
doesn't it? It
totally,
applies to our
totally.
relationships, to, everything really. Um, we can apply that philosophy to that, it's not
I
going
agree.
to be easy. Life is not plain sailing. As you said earlier, there are ups and downs. We've all come through so much. And I think a lot of the time, when we don't acknowledge the hard parts and we don't acknowledge ourselves, we don't give ourselves the praise or the credit for what we have come through. Now, I know that's something that you are quite good at with yourself. I know that you've shown yourself a lot of kindness and compassion. How does that work for you?
I think that I ended up on my journey, on my path of illness, because I was really unkind to myself. And I used to berate myself and I treated myself incredibly badly. So I worked in corporate as a business development director, and I'd been at the coalface. They're sort of, huge corporates with hundreds and hundreds of offices and a lot of people to manage, and a lot. I had big teams to keep control of, and my job was to bring in multi-million pound deals and to land huge clients, and I did land huge clients like Lloyd's and Royal Bank of Scotland and Peugeot, Orange, Renault. Those were the kind of clients and the kind of deals I used to bring to the table, but it took its toll. So I was working an 80-hour week and my body was sick. I was diagnosed with ME first. And I thought ME was a bit of a non-illness. And I didn't think it was a proper illness. And I thought I can beat it. Like everything
Yeah.
in life, I thought I could beat it. What actually happened over a 2 year period was I made myself really, really poorly and I had a stroke.
Wow.
So the stroke took me out of action for around 15 to 17 years. So it wasn't just a small stroke. I couldn't speak, I couldn't feed myself, I couldn't toilet myself, couldn't wash myself, couldn't walk. I was in a hospital bed in our front room for about 5 or 6 years. I was in hospital for 6 months. And it took me 17 years to learn to walk. So
Wow.
it's been a very, very, very long journey back. I've only been walking about 18 months, 2 years, so it's all fresh and new. Walking is still incredibly exciting. Um,
I love
and
that though. I love that it's exciting.
it is.
Um,
You
yeah.
if you live near me, you'll see me. If you live near me, you'll see me donning my walking boots, and I'm off down the street most days. Because I walk by the river and I walk in. I mean, it's not too muddy at the moment because we haven't had any rain, have we? We've had a little bit
Yeah.
the last couple of days, so the ground's dried out quite a lot. So I've been in my trainers, which has been quite exciting because walking boots are quite heavy. But yeah, I'm normally in my walking boots. I usually do an hour, hour and a half every day, because it's still a novelty. But we don't appreciate what we've got till it's gone. And I say this to women all day, every day, is that we're pushing, we're hustling, we're not listening to our bodies, we're not taking care of ourselves, we're missing our family's precious moments, we're not spending time with the children when they come home from school, we're not reading them bedtime stories, we're totally and utterly preoccupied with earning money and making our businesses a success. We're not spending time with our partners, we're not spending time with our elderly parents. The list goes on, and I'm a walking example of what happens when you don't listen. And everybody thinks it's not going to happen to them, but it is because the signs are there. You choose to ignore them at your peril. And yeah, I got sick again recently, and the reason I got sick again was because I took care of my parents while they were both dying, and they both died within 10 months of each other. And
Wow, that's
it
rough.
was it was relentless looking after them for at least it was tough for the last 12 months. So the last 12 months I was there pretty much every day. I'd probably have 1 or 2 days off a week, but they couldn't be left. So I was there large proportions of the time. And what happened was my health struggled again and I had a tumor in my throat. And this time they damaged my vocal cords and I couldn't speak when I after my operation. And it's been a hard 12 months back. It's been a really long road. And I set up a group to help me to market my business while I couldn't speak. I didn't set it up for any other reason, just to bring money into the house because my husband had been made redundant. And what happened was this community of women have blossomed. that needed the love and support and the nurturing and the care that I needed to come back to life. It wasn't just me that needed it. There was a whole group who needed it, and the group is based on kindness, and it's based on living a life that's based on freedom, and that's what we've done. And I think a lot of people think that it sounds fluffy, and we all sound a little bit sensitive, and we all sound a little bit girly. And I say to everybody, we're feminine and we're sensitive, but we're fierce. And
Yeah.
underestimate us at your peril.
Yeah. Wow. But that, I mean, that is such a story. 17 years to recover. I mean, most people would have given up, or
I
not
did
most
get, I
people,
did,
but
I
I
did,
mean, a lot of people would have just resigned themselves to that bed.
I did give up many times. And I think that's an important lesson in life is that when the going gets tough, I think we're allowed to say this is tough. I think
Mhm.
we're allowed to say that I don't want to carry on. I don't want to do this anymore. We have to get all of those feelings out, and then we let it go and we get back up. I can remember saying to Ian, I can't do this. I said it to him numerous occasions,
Mm.
but there was a drive inside of me that I was going to achieve it no matter what. The doctor said to me, you won't walk again. And he did me a favor because you tell me I can't do something very similar to you, and I'm going to do it. So
Yep.
he did me a huge favor by saying to me, you won't walk. I'm I'm not very good if you tell me I can't do something or you tell me how to do something. I think it's my fiery nature. I take after my dad, and yeah, I'll show you. And if you try to tell me how to do something, then I'm going to get a little bit antsy. If you talk to me in a really kind way and try and show me, and this is, do you think this is a good idea? And have you thought of that? Then I'll be your best friend. But if you're like, if you're like, no, you need to do it like this, I've probably switched off by the point you've got to tell me how to do it. But I think it's that kind of drive that has
Mm.
kept me going. And I've been told over the years that women have said to me, you make me feel inadequate. And you there's no way that I could do what you've done. And I think we need to stop at that point, and we need to have a think about the words that we're using. Nobody makes us feel like anything. We're the
Yeah.
ones that are responsible for our feelings. We're responsible for the way we feel. If we're feeling inadequate, we need to have a think about why we feel inadequate. And and it's usually because somebody's achieved something that we want to achieve and we just can't find a way there. And there's always a
Mm.
way, but it's not an easy way sometimes. It's a really tough way, and it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of consistency. And we live in a society where we expect everything tomorrow. We order something
Yeah.
on Amazon and it arrives on the doorstep by 10 o'clock on that night time. Life doesn't work that way, sadly. I wish it did.
I mean, yes. I mean, you inspire me. I just think, would I have done that? Would I have given up? I mean, I have a whole journey with, depression and anxiety and attempted suicide. Um, and I got through that and I come back and I look back on that and I think, how the hell did I get myself into that place in the first place? But, I've come through it. But I look at you and I think, would I have done that? Would I have had the drive? Um, and I think, yes, there's a tiny bit of me inside, like you, I have that fire that says you're not giving up on anything. You're not giving up on yourself, you're not giving up on your kids, you're not giving up on your life. Um, we do only have one life. And I like my life really peaceful and really calm. I'm actually really quite lazy. There's nothing I enjoy better than curling up on the sofa with a good book and the cat and nobody else around.
That's one of
And
my favourite things to do. That's all I
yeah,
did yesterday. It was me, the
yeah,
cat, a book. That was, and that's a beautiful thing to do.
yeah. I mean, yesterday I actually went to the pub by myself to watch a band that I love. And it's weird because I walked into that pub and I was sat in the bar stool and several people came up to me and said, are you by yourself? And I said, yes. Over the other side of the bar, there were 4 or 5 men by themselves. Nobody came to ask them, are you by yourselves?
Interesting, isn't it?
Interesting, isn't it? Yeah. And I think, yeah, just because I'm a woman sat there. I mean, I go by myself to watch the bands because I love the music and I know if I go with friends, they'll want to talk. I don't want to do that. So
I go
yeah,
to the cinema a lot on my own. I love to
yeah,
walk to the cinema and watch a film. And I
yeah,
think that, I take my favourite snacks and I curl up in the chair because our cinema's got luxury recliners, and I'm really comfy. and they're all in twos. So the chances of somebody sitting by me are going to be very slim because you tend to book two together. And I don't tend to go to films when they launch. I tend to go when they've been out a few weeks and they're a bit quieter.
Yeah.
And I think I can't think of anything nicer than going to the cinema on my own
Yeah.
and watching a film. But you have to get to a point where you're comfortable in your own skin, don't you, to be able to do
Yes.
these things.
Yeah. And I think that's a lot of, I think that drive to actually, the drive that you had to recover and kind of the drive that I have, um, that drives you as well to actually learn to be comfortable in your own skin, doesn't it? Because I think a lot of the time we're grown up, we're not given that. I mean, I know certainly, my mother told me I was useless all the time, told me I didn't have an artistic bone in my body, and that I would never make anything of myself.
Mm,
And so I've had this little drive all the time to kind of prove her wrong, but not just
mm.
prove her wrong, but to actually, I guess, in a way, to show myself too that actually I'm not who she says I am.
Yeah. I think with this, I always say to everybody that there is always going to be something that drives you, and it's finding out what that is. And
Yeah,
business isn't for everybody, and
yeah,
going to live music on your own and going to the cinema on your own isn't going to be for everybody. We have to find what our passions are and what drives us. And if you can marry your passion and your drive with your business, then you're onto a winner. And one of the things when I was training a group of women this morning, I said to them, if I said you can just do one thing for the rest of your life, what pops into your head? Because that's the thing that you love, that's the thing that you're passionate about, and that's the thing that you're going to continue to do. I
mm,
think too often we do what we think we should be doing, and we do what we think, well, I'm good at that and it brings in some money. So I'm just going to do that. But you're never going to be successful at it because there isn't enough passion there and there isn't enough drive. And when the going gets really tough, like we've been through COVID, we were all stuck in our houses.
mm.
There has to be something that is going to keep you going through the tough times. It is going to help you to get back up. And if it's mediocre, if it's I can take it or leave it, not going to get you through the tough times.
Yeah, no, I mean my business died during COVID because I was just doing hands-on Reiki treatments at the time, and obviously we couldn't do those. But I wasn't one of the ones sadly stuck in my house. I would have loved that. I because I was in a teaching job at the time, I had to go into school with the children who were key worker children. So I didn't have quite the same experience of lockdown as everybody else. I didn't learn flower arranging or how to make sourdough bread or
I was still I was
things.
still
I was
working.
working.
Yeah. I still work because my business
Yeah.
was online,
Yeah,
and it always has been, because obviously I built my business from my bed before I could walk. So I
that's just
I was I,
amazing.
I
Yeah,
was very lucky that my business has always been online because I couldn't go out.
yeah,
I've only been back out in the world for a very short period of time, and it's all still new, and it's
yeah,
and every day is different. Um, but I think there has to be something big that happens in your life to to put you onto a different path, to push you onto the path that you should be on, or to do what you've always wanted to do, or to be brave enough to take that action. I think
yeah.
else we don't do it, do we?
No, the comfort zone has to become very uncomfortable, I think, for us to kind of do something. And for me, it was, the divorce and kind of trying to commit suicide and realizing I was, I had three beautiful, wonderful children whom I loved dearly. And I thought, you know what, I'm so miserable, I'm prepared to actually leave them. No, there's something wrong here. And that's
I've
what
got to
kind
do
of,
some. I've got to
I've
do
got to
something
do
about it.
something. I've got to change this. And that's what kind of led me on my journey. And that's kind of, I try to help other women do the same, get out of their feeling of stuckness. Because I think we can get stuck in our stuckness, can't we? We can kind of, and we talk to ourselves. I realized that as well. I was reading back one of my journals a couple of nights ago, and I realized that I was stuck because I kept telling myself I was stuck. I kept telling
Mm,
myself all these things about myself that actually weren't true. And that's
yeah.
when, and now I realize that actually I've come a long way from that time because now I can catch myself doing that and go, hang
Mm,
on a minute, you know, you're not back there. You're not, things are different now. But it's hard. It is hard. It's not an easy path, is it?
I don't think life is easy. I don't think it was meant to be easy. We've come here with a purpose. We've come here to achieve things, and I think if we're going to have a meaningful life and we're going to look back at our legacy, we're going to look back and think, well, I've achieved, I came here to set out what I came here to do. And that is going to take, it's going to take time, it's going to take effort, it's going to take grit and determination. We all face difficult things every day. And it's our legacy is how we deal with them and how we react to them. That's the only thing we can control. We can't control what happens. We're all going to lose people. We're going to have illness. We're going to have trauma. Things are going to happen to all of us, throughout our lives, and it's how we deal with that. And I think, when you can dig deep and you can find a way through, then you can't help but feel incredibly proud of yourself. You can't help but pat yourself on the back and say, I did that. And we do learn from it. We do, I think it's also important to say there's going to be a period where you feel like a victim. And I think that's okay as well. I think a lot of people get told, you can't be a victim. You've got to get back up. You've got to fight. And I think we need that time. We need the time to process. We need the time to understand what's happened to us. We need the time to deal with the feelings in the best way that we see fit, and then we get back up. I think if
Yeah.
you try to get back up too quickly, and you attack yourself for being a victim, and you attack yourself for feeling the way that you are, that can be detrimental as well. And I think in every period of my life, I've given myself time to adjust before I get back up. And I think it's okay to be a victim for a little while, but the important thing is that you need to be a victor at some point. You've got to
Yeah.
say, okay, enough's enough. That I've done my grieving. Now I've got to get back up.
Yeah, I mean, what I always say is we need to, at all stages, is treat ourselves with kindness and compassion. And you said, I call it wallowing rather than being a victim. But we deserve and we're allowed to wallow and we're allowed to feel all those feelings. And I think back to you when you said you were working an 80-hour week. If you're working an 80-hour week, you don't have time to be you, to feel anything, do anything. And if we were putting ourselves in those situations, we're like losing whole huge aspects of life. I mean, life is all about kind of our feelings and stuff, isn't it? Everybody exults about being in
Yeah.
love, and they talk about love and they love this and they love that, and actually, but there are other feelings too, and we need to
Mm.
address those ones as well.
Yeah, I think mine was complete validation. It was just trying to validate myself at every turn. So it was always on to the next thing. It was always on to the next job. It was on to the next promotion. It was on to the next big client. It was all about validation. I never felt good enough. It was a self-worth. It was basically, it was an explosion waiting to happen. Um, it was going to take something, it had to take something big to take me down.
Mm,
Because the feelings of lack of worth, of not being good enough, were huge. My mum was, she was a narcissist. Like a lot of, there's a lot of people that I know, their parents are like that. She was an alcoholic most of her life. She didn't cope with life, and so alcohol numbed the things that she didn't want to deal with. And she didn't want children, and she was very, very clear about that.
mm,
She didn't want to have children. We happened, and my view on that is, well, you should have been more careful. We all know how children are made. If you didn't want them, you should have been a
yeah.
little bit more careful, because what then happened was she ended up, damaging two human beings that
Mm,
didn't want to be on the planet because of how she'd made them feel. Um, but I'm proud of the fact that I turned it round. I'm proud of the fact that I've done the work. I'm proud of the fact that I'm still a work in progress, like most of us are.
mm,
But I treat myself with the utmost kindness and compassion now. But it's taken me a long time. And we talk about things happen for a reason. It had to happen because things wouldn't have changed. If that
mm.
hadn't have happened, I probably wouldn't be here anymore. I
Yeah.
needed to address the elephant in the room.
I mean, I love that, because kindness and compassion to yourself are kind of they're my whole ethos. And it's big, that comes from the fact that I was never very, I wasn't very kind or compassionate to myself for years and years, because I grew up again with a mum who wanted babies, but once we were past the baby stage, didn't want children. And I was a twin. She didn't realize she was having twins. And my twin sister was the perfect baby. And I did nothing but yell, as you can probably imagine. So there's that whole kind of, she told me at one point that she didn't like me. She'd never loved me. She'd never bonded with me. And so I had all that issue. So all I could hear for years was her voice in my head telling me the things that she told me. And it took me a long time to learn to be kind to myself and to learn not to listen to that voice and to create my own voice that was kinder and more compassionate. And I think we've been on for quite a while now. I am absolutely.
We could talk for hours, Neve,
We
couldn't we?
could.
But obviously, I don't think the listeners are going to want us to go on for very much longer.
No, but I am absolutely in awe of you.
Thank you.
And as I've said at the end of every podcast, I am going to put a community together. I'm not quite sure what that community is, whether it's going to be on Facebook or WhatsApp. I'm going to do a poll where all the speakers can join and all the listeners can join in as well, and people can get to know each other.
That would be lovely.
And connect and ask questions and stuff, because, we're living in kind of, from what I see, an epidemic of loneliness. And so I want people connecting. And so I will share your details at the end when this goes live. But yeah, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to wind this up. I am just awestruck by you, your tenacity, your courage, your kindness, your compassion. You're just amazing. And I'm just so, so happy that you decided to join me here today.
I think I'm truly grateful for your kindness. I think that we are just us, and we do what's in our heart, and we do what's in our spirit, and we do the best we can. And I think if by sharing our journey and the obstacles that have been put in our path can make a difference to just one person, then it's worth sharing the story. So I hope that anybody that's listening that's having a tough time and doesn't think they can find a way through and thinks that they need to give up, then you and I can give them that guiding light that they can do this. They can do anything they put their mind to. Just might be a little bit tougher than they first thought.
Yep, it might be a little bit tougher, but at the end of the day, if you're kind to yourself, you can do it. Thank you so much, Andrea, for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and I will see you again on the next one.
Thank you so much.